Today, I'm going to be speaking about what we do with regard to searching for documentation and eventually or mainly focusing on the sharing of underwater cultural heritage. This is a long-term project executed by the University of Malta together with Heritage Malta. The university does the research part, Heritage Malta really does the management side. Before I continue, I'd like to state quite unashamedly that I do envy my colleagues who work in the management of cultural heritage on land. You know, I'm green with envy every time I see them at work. Why? Why? Because access to sites on land is much easier, even remotely. I mean, if we take the pyramids as a classic cultural heritage site, which sort of anybody who's interested in visiting, you know, in cultural heritage, in history, in archaeology, I'm sure that the pyramids are on their bucket list. So you can go onto something, a tool like Google Earth. If you can take the street view and see and move around and see what the site actually looks like. Now, this is good if this is useful if you've been already and you want to explain. It's useful if you're planning a trip. It's useful if you're never able to go. Okay, similar to these times. The pyramids are also available in 3D, so you can actually, you know, sort of in inverted commas, fly around these. And if that was not enough, if you wanted to sort of take your thirst for knowledge further, there are certain Egyptian sites. This is a project run by Harvard, whereby you can actually go through this Egyptian tomb virtually, click on the blue and white icons, and read about what it is that you are seeing. It's a tool called Matterport, I believe, that's being used, and there are several sites on the internet available to view. On the other hand, if you want to visit a site in Malta that is underwater, you use the same tools such as Google Earth, zoom in again, and once again, and all you're left with is this pixelated blue. There's no 3D reconstruction, or at least there may be a few, but nothing compared to the concentration of terrestrial sites that are available on a go-to tool such as Google Earth. So the question remains is what's out there primarily, and how do we make this available? So no knowledge can lead very easily to either no decision, so out of sight, out of mind, or no knowledge, even worse, can lead to poor decisions, okay? Permitting, for example, development in an area where there may be a concentration of cultural heritage, not protecting a site, not designating an area underwater as of archaeological importance, okay? So it's important to find out what submerged cultural assets we have. Can we implement an integrated approach for the management of the sites that we do have? And how do we protect what we have on our seabed? And finally, okay, I think all the questions 1, 2, and 3 would mean nothing if we don't share our work and we don't share our cultural heritage. So essentially our parting shot is we need to base our decisions related to the integrated management of underwater cultural heritage on information. And our starting point locally is going out, deploying, we used to use a toad system, deploying our AUV, which has a side scan, and literally just mowing the lawn, doing block by block, okay, and finding out whatever is on our seabed. This is a typical area of survey. Generally, we cover approximately 6 square kilometers per day. How many days out at sea we do is dependent on budget, availability of a boat, whether the equipment's working. This year, we spent about 60 days out at sea surveying. Other aspects of our field work were interrupted by because of COVID, our shallow water excavations, and therefore we got a special permit to from the port health director to be able to go out and survey in spring. So we have in some ways a disappointing fieldwork season because a couple of projects had to be cancelled, but in another we were able, these cancellations facilitated more and more surveying. The idea is to cover all our territorial waters, all the seabed in our territorial waters to the 12 nautical mile limit, which is somewhere here. Okay, we do have other areas. This spring we covered all this area here. We've got some areas here and here. We're just over 35% done. It will take us between another 5 and 7 years to complete this mapping process. We start from the 50-meter contour. Why don't we start shallower? The main reason being that Malta is a well-visited scuba diving destination. So we assume that most of the sites that are visible, that are not buried under sand and sediment, have been discovered already, or they are covered in Posidonia seagrass, which incidentally grows down to the 50-meter contour, or sand and sediment. So we concentrate on, so to speak, non-standard scuba depth. So from the 50-meter contour out to whatever depths we have in our territorial waters, which I think within the 12 nautical mile go down to about 1,000 meters, but a very small area over here. It's an ambitious project, but a project that is yielding a lot of positive results, as we shall be seeing, not just in archaeology. So the horizontal benefits of this broad approach, okay, is that we gather information that can help other researchers or researchers from other disciplines. So these are massive Posidonia meadows, okay, so we can actually share these data sets, and we do share these data sets with marine ecologists and marine biologists. So with regard to Posidonia, which is extremely important to our seas, it's a bioindicator, okay, so it tells us how healthy our seas are, and from an archaeological perspective, it also helps protect our archaeology by covering it. And these two circles are actually sinkholes, so caves that collapsed prior to the rise in sea level. So again, you know, archaeologically interesting, geologically interesting as well, and so we're able to locate such sites and share these with our colleagues. In a higher resolution, these are clumps of Posidonia oceanica, and these are in between the clumps you can see the actual waves of the sand waves, and the resolution is such that we're able to measure these not only in length and width, but also in height of the height of the meadows. It's not all It's not all nice stuff that we find. You know, if there is something like this group of barrels which clearly have this toxic label, or label that indicates something toxic that may have been carried in or that they still contain, we obviously pass on this information to the local environmental authorities so that they can take the necessary action. Okay, so I've shown that our work benefits many other disciplines and agencies. We work with a resolution and within parameters that suits us, okay, because ultimately we're doing this for archaeological purposes, but we know that these parameters are also very helpful for these other disciplines and agencies. And sometimes I wish that these other disciplines and agencies would have the same consideration to the archaeological community. So what type of targets? This is a sonar image of what turned out to be an 18th century shipwreck. So the ship dates to the time of the Knights of St. John. The reason why it still maintains such a perfect ship shape, including the hull and the shadow indicates that there is still volume in this shipwreck, is because the sheathing, okay, the copper sheathing is still intact on this one, obviously complete with a cargo of wine, etc. And then, given Malta's position in the middle of the Mediterranean and the role it played in both World War I, strangely enough, and more so in World War II, there is a massive concentration of modern shipwrecks. And you don't have to be a sonar expert to identify what we're looking at here. I can tell you that in our waters we have a massive concentration of aircraft, aircraft from 4 different nationalities. There are German, Italian, British, and also American aircraft, making it one of sort of the unique depositories of aircraft crash sites in anywhere in the world, actually. And these cover a period, okay, of advance in aeronautical technology that was unprecedented. If you just think of, you know, at the beginning of World War II, some air forces were still flying biplanes. By the end of World War II, there were air forces that were flying jet planes. And a lot of this evolution in aeronautical technology is reflected on the seabed around the Maltese Islands. Okay, so that's great. That's the exploration part. And what happens after that? So with the information that we gather, or rather behind the data set, as you know, quite clearly, we process this in a very specialized software. We can measure the wreck, we can measure the height, we can map the debris field if this exists, and obviously all these data sets are georeferenced. It's no use gathering all this important information without repeatability. We do not really speak about accuracy, because on these massive areas, you know, when we're talking about blocks of 6 kilometers squared, the main thing that we're after at this level is repeatability. Can you take me back with a team of divers, or can you take me back with a remote operated vehicle to the site? If the answer is yes, then we're happy. Obviously, within 10 to 15 meters or 20 meters, because you don't want to be diving at certain depths and having to spend your first 10 minutes looking for the site. Accuracy comes at a much more specific level, as was so clearly and eloquently shown by Stella in the previous presentation. Okay, so we were going out there, we're surveying hundreds of square kilometers, we're finding dozens and dozens of targets. What next? So there are two levels of legal obligation. There's the local level of obligation, which is stems from the Cultural Heritage Act of 2003. In 2003, terrestrial cultural heritage and its management covered, okay, so everything was geared rather towards the management and protection and study of terrestrial cultural heritage, and then with a proviso and anything within Maltese territorial waters. Okay, so maritime archaeology was covered simply by adding that proviso at the end of every paragraph, for example, that was dedicated to traditional terrestrial cultural heritage. A year and a half ago, we updated this law, and we literally got the definition from the UNESCO convention. Malta has not signed, let alone ratified the convention, but we are meeting them next week, coincidentally, because our government has now shown an interest in signing and eventually ratifying this. So we got the definition, etc., and literally word for word put the definition into our updated Cultural Heritage Act. You can't do that in academics. That's called plagiarism. Apparently, in legislating, you're able to do that. So, lucky lawyers. And then a series of other provisos that enabled the National Agency for the Management of Cultural Heritage, which is called Heritage Malta, to actually start working towards opening the sites. The concept being, why can somebody pay and obtain a ticket, which is essentially a permit to go and visit an archaeological site like the Neolithic temples, and not be able to visit a World War II shipwreck, for example. Okay, so once we have all this information, the Heritage Malta has to start to take a number of decisions, including whether, heaven or hell, whether we do declare an area of archaeological importance, whether we don't. And a simplistic approach would be to declare everything that we find as an area of archaeological importance. But this is where one has to be kind of diplomatic. We're a very small island, very, very densely populated, with no mountains, no rivers, hardly any countryside. So the sea is the getaway for many segments of our population, be it for fishing, be it water skiing, sailing, etc. So, i.e., there are many stakeholders out there. If we all of a sudden declare 300 sites of archaeological importance, each with its buffer zone, it's two things. One, we're going to make a lot of stakeholders very angry very quickly. And two, from our perspective, it will become a logistical nightmare to go from managing 0 sites underwater with all their difficulties to managing 300. So we have a system in place whereby we score the sites. We ask a number of questions. So, for example, is the site unique in Malta? Is there 1? Is there 2 to 3? 4 to 6, for example? I can't remember the exact numbers. And according to your answers, you're giving scores. We have an Excel sheet set up, and then you move from local to international. How many sites? So, for example, if it's a type of a plane X, there may be 1 in Malta, but they may be 20 in Croatia, for example. All these numbers are fed into a formula, and a site is given a score. And then we obviously have a classification, and this kind of classification informs us. We don't take an automatic decision based on simply on this formula, but it is very, very informative and also leaving a paper trail. So once we decide to protect a site, we prepare a document according to UNESCO standards. And this is not only important with regard to documentation, okay, that leads to the management, to the integrated management of underwater cultural heritage. But if we ever question, so for example, a hobby fisherman goes to his local MP and says, look, I've been fishing there for 20 years. What's the issue? Why can't I go there now? We're called up, we can take our documentation and say, look, our decision is based on, and we plonk the file on his or her desk. And as I said, Heritage Malta is, so heritage management is divided into two main agencies, okay? So you have the superintendents of cultural heritage, which is the regulator. So the superintendents decides who gets a permit to excavate, who gets a permit to survey, for example. They also monitor sites, and Heritage Malta is the operator, okay? And the superintendents also keeps an eye on Heritage Malta to ensure that they manage the sites in a more than acceptable manner. The decision process, okay, also, so now all of this happens within Heritage Malta, working in close collaboration with the university, okay, with the Department of Classics and Archaeology at the university. Once we have these decisions taken, okay, so how important is a site? This information also helps us take decisions with regard to what assets we can throw at which sites, because if in a season you've discovered 24 new sites, as we did, I think it was a bit more, in various states of preservation, as we did this year, you can't go to all 24, dive down to 110 meters to make a, to record the site in detail. So we actually need to prioritize. Once a decision is taken as to which sites we are going to record and study in depth, okay, we generally deploy a team of technical divers, okay. The idea is, without going into detail, the idea is to create a high resolution 3D model, okay, no matter what the depth is, no matter what the site is. I've got a fantastic 3D team, John Wood, Kari Hittinen, and occasionally helped by Chris Rowland, okay, fantastic guys. And the idea is to create a scaled 3D photogrammetric model of the site when the site was discovered. So this gives us a yardstick. If the site starts to collapse, we can sort of go and survey it again and find out which areas are collapsing, the size of collapse, etc. These kind of models also help with the ecology of the site, something I will return to in a couple of minutes. So these models, originally produced for the management of the site, are also, as you can see from this fly-through, useful for presentations, for education, and we've been working on this project discreetly, in the sense that it's only recently that we've started to present it as this, in this holistic manner as I'm doing today. We started gathering a number of these models and basically realizing that they're also attractive for a more generic audience. One thing that we are doing, okay, is this is from yesterday's Times of Malta. One thing we are doing is we are collaborating with local dive clubs. So this is another way of sharing the sites. And in fact, we cover all the costs of the boat, the gases, etc. We also help them with our divers' equipment. And we have started a project intended to remove fishing nets from historic sites. This is important from various points of view. The obvious, you're removing marine litter and the impact of ghost fishing. You're preserving the site itself, and just as important, you're giving a sense of ownership to the local diving community. Whereas up until a few years ago, these guys were going, sort of looking over their shoulder as to whether they were going to be caught diving on historic sites. They're now actually actively participating in their management and preservation. These are a couple of slides, more slides showing the operation that was concluded only last week. And this is the entire net that was removed from one aircraft. We're developing a marketing idea now based on the recycling of this net, but I've been sworn to secrecy, but you will watch this space, you will hear more about it in the coming months. There are other threats. So this is an anti-aircraft gun on a Polish warship in Maltese waters. This was as she was discovered and first dived in, I believe, 2015, and the next year she was severely damaged. This is the same corner. So if we go back, you can see that the casing here is perfectly rectangular. The gun is facing forward. Unfortunately, the casing has been broken. It was the anchor chain of a large vessel that got caught and damaged the site. So the updated Cultural Heritage Act has given us the power. So on the basis of the paperwork that we prepare, we present these data sets to the superintendents of cultural heritage and say, look, on the basis of our research, we believe that Rex A, B, and C should be protected. Again, the updated Cultural Heritage Act facilitates and actually has included the possibility of declaring an area of archaeological importance underwater. These are marked on all updated charts. If you scroll and click on them, you can see in this particular case, Southwold, historic wreck area, diving restricted, removal of historical artifacts prohibited, stopping prohibited, except to save human life, and bottom fishing is also prohibited. Once these areas are declared by the superintendents of cultural heritage, then Transport Malta comes in. It is the agency that takes care of navigation of in Maltese territorial waters. They issue a notice to mariners, and that gives a second level of legal protection. So now, if you're diving in this area or within its buffer zone, so the pink dotted line that you see around the wreck marker is actually a buffer zone. If you're caught breaking the law inside this buffer zone, not only can you be prosecuted as per the Cultural Heritage Act, but you can be prosecuted by Transport Malta for breaking the notice to mariners. This doesn't mean that everybody obeys all of the time. We obviously have to patrol the sites, and we have other stakeholders who help us patrol the sites. And for the first time, rather than hiding our underwater cultural heritage, which was the policy up until a few years ago, secrecy doesn't work. Either fishermen are going to find and they're going to tell their cousin, or divers are going to hear about it, and or they're called by fishermen to free a net. And then the word spreads, and we were always, we as in cultural heritage managers, were always playing catch up. Okay, so first the site would be discovered, possibly disturbed, or worse still, looted, and then we would find out and have to play catch up. So with this broad survey, we're taking a proactive approach. We're a step ahead, and now we're shouting from the rooftop. So we're distributing these posters to yacht marinas, to stores where they sell fishing gear. So on the one side we have the declared historic sites, and on the other side we've got the location. It's an approximate location with the buffer area radius and the list of what you can and cannot do or rather what you cannot do in these areas. And we publish these in both English and Maltese, and I'll have to keep updating them because this was the first one done in 2019, and in 2020 we added 3 more sites, and in 2021 we're going to add at least another 3 sites. So the list is growing. So rather than, as I said before, rather than declaring 30 in one go, we started with 15, added 3 last year, add another 3, and this amount will keep growing. You will notice that the buffer areas are rather large, so 250 meters for aircraft, 500 meters for ships. In all probability, we will reduce these. We will reduce these to 100 meters or 150 meters for planes and 250 meters for ships. It's easier to start strict and then loosen a bit rather than to start small and then have to try and claw back that seabed, from the various stakeholders. We had plans to add 3 buoys because most of our sites are are deep, and you need scope, quite a lot of scope between the buoy and the anchor block. We can't put in buoys for sites that are in 110 meters because they become useless for divers. Okay, and I'll come to the diving part in a minute. But we do have 3 buoys. We're meant to install them this year, but because diving was almost non-existent, at least from a tourism point of view, because of COVID, we decided to spare them a year of getting beaten up in the sea, sort of for nothing, and we'll be installing them in 2021. So what are the what other information does the side scan give us? So this is a high resolution or relatively high resolution sonar image of HMS Russell. Okay, and prior to our survey, HMS Russell was a sort of X marks the spot. Nowadays, if somebody wants to come and dive HMS Russell, we can guide them. Listen, do you want to dive the stern and explore where the damage is? Do you want to explore the starboard side, or would you like to explore the debris field, for example? So now, from rather than one site, which used to be a hit and miss and done illegally, now we can guide you actually as to where to dive. And to dive the sites, you must do this with a registered dive school and through a registered dive boat. The dive school pays an annual fee to Heritage Malta. They get access to the booking system. You basically, type in the names of the divers, which site you want to go on, when, etc. It has to be very flexible, obviously, because of weather, currents, and so on. And we're able to change the tickets sort of in real time, something that a terrestrial booking system doesn't need to face. If you're going into a museum, whether it's sunny, windy, or rainy, you can still enter that museum. The advantages of the system for Malta are 2. The proximity. Yes, you can dive an ancient site in Greece and then dive the Britannic, but the geographical distances that one has to travel, and the same with places like Italy and Sicily, where they have absolutely stunning wrecks, but you need, as a dive group, one would have to sort of move quite a lot. In Malta, you can stay in one place, and the biggest concentration of sites are in this area. We're moving to open a site in off Gozo. And obviously the weather, you know, the only sting in this tale is if the northwesterly blows, but it's obviously one thing that we can't control. We run access to the sites based on three criteria. Obviously, respect our historic wrecks, respect the marine life. I said I'll come back to marine ecology. You know, you have to imagine the seabed around the Maltese Islands as a desert because of, you know, big deposits of sediment. And these shipwrecks, especially the modern ones, are these kind of oases of concentrations of marine life. They are very, very important. Not only fish and things like you know, Mediterranean spiny lobster, but we have large deposits of black coral growing on these sites, and obviously do not enter the wreck. So we run a clear no entry, no penetration into the shipwrecks, mainly foremost because they are, some of these are war graves, and if something else that's obviously present on these shipwrecks is UXO, unexploded ordnance, and therefore, you know, some type of behavior on the shipwreck could also prove to be dangerous. Okay, what wrecks? I did mention planes. There was a massive air battle around Malta, and because of our small walls that divide our fields, crash landing on land was considered to be sort of dangerous. So many planes ditched at sea. This is work that a PhD student of mine, Tony Burgess, is starting to, not starting, actually, this was when we started. We published this work together. The blue dot, the blues are the goodies, the allies, the reds are the baddies, the Italians and the Germans in the context of World War II, of course. And the round dots are fighters, the triangles are bombers, and these are the ones that we quantified from the literature. One of the ongoing projects that we have is to correlate what the archaeology is telling us with what the literature is telling us. Some incredibly rare planes. This is an RE 2001, a Reggiana 2001, which we discovered this year. There's only one surviving example of this, and it's in Italy, still being restored. The skeleton of a hurricane, also discovered this year. You can see the scale in the right-hand corner. Where, this is a photo by John Wood just after we finished the photogrammetry, the photographs for the photogrammetry. A Ju-88. This is actually one of the sites that's open to the public. It's upside down, but very well preserved. And you can see from the concentration of sea urchins and the colors of the sponges what I mean with regard to ecological hotspots in a positive way. But we don't just have planes. Shipwrecks from the Polish Navy. This is the L-72 Kujawiak. We not only studied it in detail, recorded it despite being at a depth of 97 meters, but we were also asked, so the Maltese government was asked by the Polish government whether we could attempt to recover the bell. We try as much as possible to leave objects in situ, as UNESCO's first option asks us to do. There are certain cases when we do recover, either if something is very lootable, like a loose lantern, for example, and then we will recover that, put it through the conservation process, and then hopefully have it displayed. In this particular case, it was sort of a very, you know, the Poles had quite a hard time in World War II, and anyway, we were asked specifically to recover it. This is the bell when she was recovered, and this is the bell after conservation at the lab labs of Heritage Malta. And not just modern wrecks, we're working very hard to open up this site as a deep water archaeological park. It's a non-traditional amphora shipwreck, whereby the amphorae are spread over a wide area. So this is something that we're actively working on, something that we hope to implement in the coming 2 to 3 years. And again, this is from the London Times of last Thursday. We are also, the Heritage Malta also has the facility to issue permits through the same booking system for super yachts or yachts with manned submersibles. Okay, so we do have this facility. It's something that we were not busy with, but we have had 3 or 4 permits issued, and something that hopefully post-COVID it will be something that picks up. And these are some wrecks in much deeper waters, okay, which to date technical divers cannot reach. So these are some of the wrecks that we make available with obviously very strict conditions, including the choice of whether to put a Heritage Malta person on the vessel during deployment of the manned submersible. The wreck at 150 meters, obviously less light means that paintwork still survives, you know, all the way down to this one at 350 meters. This is a clear idea, or from this image you can get a clear idea of the concentration of black coral, which is actually white underwater on these sites. Okay, very quickly, because I'm running out of time. This is all well and good if you're a technical diver, all well and good if you are a millionaire or multi-millionaire with a super yacht and a manned submersible on board the yacht. But what about the general public who may never visit Malta, or may be thinking about visiting Malta and, you know, and wants to find out more about its submerged cultural heritage? So this year we launched a virtual museum, underwatermalta.org. Okay, this is the landing page. You can either browse through that. We launched it with 10 sites. There are going to be 5 more sites added by the end of this year, and at least 6 sites added in 2021. You know, we're going to continue adding as we go along. And sort of this is where the science of the 3D photogrammetric models sort of marries into the sharing of underwater cultural heritage. What I meant sort of saying that these could be attractive beyond the scientific community. You can also browse by map. Once you click on a site, you have the possibility to twist this in 360, visit the annotations. There's traditional museum-like panels where you can read about the aircraft itself, the wreck, you know, and other details. And then importantly, if you want to go into more detail, you can visit the site via traditional video, or even a very high resolution 3D model, which you can visit with VR goggles. Okay, so I'm here presenting. I like to, as with Stella's last slides, this obviously everything I've presented here is the work of a large group of people, be they the 3D photogrammetry people, be they the diving experts, the dive safety officer, my postgraduate students, etc., etc. So on behalf of everyone, okay, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.